So good afternoon, everybody. Could I just ask you to switch off your cameras, switch off your mics, and we'll get going in a couple of minutes after we admit everybody. So we'll start shortly after 2 o'clock. So good afternoon, everybody. I'll get going in a moment. We're just going to let a few more people join us. So as I said, could you switch off your mics and your cameras, and we'll get going shortly after 2 o'clock. So I'll just get us going in a moment. So it's just shortly after 2 o'clock, so we'll get going. So just bear with me a second while I get my, there we go. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our last webinar of 2022. And today we're going to cover the issue of real estate costs and energy reduction. So we're going to share with you some tips and strategies for 2023 and the year ahead. So just by way of introductions, for those who do not know me, I'm John O'Brien. I'm the MD and founder of LCMB. And with me today, I have my colleagues who I'll ask to switch on their cameras when they're presenting. Rudy Duplessis, our Director of Operations, and Tom Cudmore, Senior Consultant who manages our Thrive and Workplace Optimization work. So LCMB, we're a business that focuses on helping our clients make their buildings work harder for their organizations. And our purpose is to transform the impact that workplaces, buildings, and estates have on the lives of our customer organizations, their people, and indeed their customers. So the objective for today is to share some tips about making your workplaces, buildings, and budgets work harder in 2023. And we've got some tips and guidance which cover the tips we'll be covering today, as well as some background in other areas in terms of energy, net zero, carbon optimization that you can download from our website. So please feel free to go to the website and download those tips. And if you'd like some further guidance, information, or to discuss a particularly thorny issue, please feel free to get in contact with myself or any member of our team. So I'm going to start with the economy. So I've got up on the screen a forecast from the Bank of England as to what life is going to look like over the coming 12 and 24 months into 23 and 24. And unfortunately, it's all looking a little bit grim. As you'll have seen trailed in the news over the last weeks and since September, since the change of Prime Minister in the UK, we're expecting to have a recession if we're not already in one, with GDP reducing by about 2% in 2023 and then a small reduction through 24 before rebounding in 25. CPI inflation is forecast to peak this year at just under 11% and then drop to an average of just a little over 5% next year before getting back to more like its long-term average of about 1.5, 1.4% in 2024. What's interesting about this forecast and this recession is that we're going to see some loosening, but very little loosening in the employment market, with the unemployment rates going from at 3.7% this year to 5% next year and just under 6% the year after. So very little significant change in terms of the employment market. And bank rates are expected to go from 3% this year, peaking to about 5% and a bit next year before falling back to below 5 and then ranging it at sort of 4.5 to 5% in 25. So this forecast is probably a little grimmer and bleaker than some of the other recent forecasts that I've seen. So Goldman Sachs are forecasting the UK to shrink through the first 3 quarters of 23 before rebounding to growth in 24. So I guess my hope is that we'll see the UK economy present or move forward more in line with the Goldman Sachs forecast than the Bank of England forecast, which is reasonably pessimistic. So what are the economic conclusions for the year ahead? So GDP will shrink, so that we're expecting to see the activity in the UK market shrink with business to consumer spending, and perhaps business to business spending shrink. So that means for all of us, our budgets are likely to get tighter. Inflation's likely to stay high until at least the end of 2023. And again, this means that budgets are likely to get tighter for all of us. The labour market is likely to stay tight with some minor loosening. So again, this implies that budgets will get tighter. And energy costs are likely to stay high into 24. And some commentators are forecasting that we've reached a new sort of medium-term average for the cost of electricity and gas. And again, this is suggesting that budgets will get tighter. So our conclusion, I think, unfortunately, is that all of our budgets are going to get tighter. So the key themes for 2023 that we're seeing at LCMB and with our customers going forward is that we'll all need to squeeze more from our existing workplaces and budgets in terms of thinking about how we squeeze out more output, performance, and productivity from our workplaces, buildings, and budgets. And we'll need to become more efficient and reduce the spend wherever possible in terms of the facilities management spend, the sort of energy use, and the project spend across our organizations and estates in terms of refurbishment and new build. So I'm just going to pause there, and I'm going to ask my colleague, Tom Cudmore, to switch on his camera, introduce himself, and Tom will give us a bit of an overview as to some thoughts from our organization, clients, and experience as to how you can perhaps squeeze more from your existing workplaces and budgets. So over to you, Tom. You're on mute.
Sorry, that's a good start. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking through our Thrive tool, our building performance optimization approach, and how that sort of impacts on both the buildings and the people. So let me just bring up my slides. Is everyone able to see that? So the Thrive performance part of the LCMB business is an evolution of our work for over the sort of 5-6 years now, when we first started sort of exploring how we can blend technology with consultancy to actually further enhance buildings beyond that sort of traditional approach, which was looking at things on a sort of needs basis. The sort of Thrive concept really is underpinned by looking at what is happening now and trying to predict what's going to happen in the future, so that we can take a more intelligence-led approach to maximising the workplace. We've developed our own proprietary tool to do that, which I'll tell you a little bit about, and then the sort of use cases that we're seeing and how that's evolving. So the Thrive platform basically has the ability to integrate data from a number of data sources. The idea is that this goes embedded within the operation and can suck in data from a range of different data sources. So, for example, we will be looking at access control data to monitor occupancy closely. We have been using Internet of Things sensors to look at the indoor environment for over 6 years, and we've done our own research into how that environment impacts on people's productivity and well-being. So we've done the underlying research that's sort of building in the intelligence behind just the data that's presented to the end users. We've also focused from very early days on the importance of employee experience. So ultimately, the building is there to facilitate the work of the people within it, and fundamental to our sort of beliefs and our approach is how we can make sure it always stays as a people-focused sort of interventions, ultimately as the end goal. So the experience piece we capture in a number of ways. We've proved ourselves from our research that self-reported productivity and well-being is a valid proxy for actual output, and we measure feedback by collecting user data via mobile apps, via proactive kind of survey reporting, and a number of different mechanisms. Help desk reports are another area where we can extrapolate information that's already coming into the facilities team and present that in a way that interacts with these other variables. The energy piece is obviously a big part of the concerns for many organisations, and I guess runs in parallel with the users. So how can we optimise the best experience for the users at the lowest energy cost, the lowest carbon cost, to basically make the system work as efficiently as possible? And that's our sort of underlying objective. So ultimately, what we're doing is we're blending the consultancy support that LCMB have traditionally focused on with the technology to make that more intelligent and more efficient. What we've seen evolve is a number of different use cases. So in the early days, the focus was very much on the performance-led organizations where you're already operating your building and looking at details, but what you really want to understand is how can you go that extra mile? Where are the marginal gains to really fine-tune things? And that's still probably the core focus of Thrive and the deep learning elements of Thrive. But what we've seen actually over the last 2 years is how people are using data in a really wide variety of different use cases. And what we've seen is that our clients across all sectors, the public and private sector, our university clients through to our sort of blue chip companies, are all focused on using data more intelligently. But the use cases and the way that's being deployed will vary depending on their specific objectives. So whilst you have the guys who are still aiming for that extra edge to make sure everything is absolutely optimized, we're also seeing things like how we can use the data to give more insights into the air quality relating to ventilation systems to do proactive maintenance. We're with our university clients looking at how we can use feedback from students to again proactively take action and action things quicker than would traditionally have been done if you were waiting, for example, for an annual student survey to be completed. So we've got now clients using this from the law sector, from our university clients. We've got a company, Havas at King's Cross, who we've worked with over the last 3 years to really evolve what we're doing. And the next steps are all about how we can add sort of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So that's where we're working behind the scenes to see what are the relationships between all this data, how can we use this data to basically assess what's happening now, and then inform the building services and facilities teams what to do with the building proactively to keep energy optimized, to keep the environment optimized, and to basically continue to improve the performance of how that facilities team are operating. So they're the sort of main objectives of what we're doing in our workplace optimization area. I'll hand back to well, I'll hand across to Rudy, who can talk about what we're doing on our FM space. Unless there's anything else you wanted to jump in with, John.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Tom, before we pass back to Rudy, maybe you could just say for the attendees today, the sort of issues within the workplace which improve performance, productivity, and cognitive capability of the people within the space, and what things people should be looking to focus on to drive and deliver more value. And then we'll pass to Rudy.
Okay. Yeah. So the main factors are around there's both perceived and unperceived factors, I guess, but the fundamental ones that we find are around thermal comfort and around room CO2 conditions. The thermal comfort obviously being the condition that people can perceive and is always challenging for any building operator, because we know occupants have different comfort levels, and people are very sensitive to those. So small changes make a big difference in people's attitude, productivity, and how they feel about the workplace. This second area of CO2 is very different in that people don't perceive when CO2 is outside optimal bands unless it's extremely high. And the subtleties are still quite impactful. So our baseline target, if you were looking at well building standard, the sort of gold standard would be under 800 parts per million for CO2. Our guidance is always to keep below 1,500 parts per million. And our own research showed that basically when you were over 1,000 parts per million, you were seeing drop in performance and cognitive ability. So most buildings, new buildings, will be designed for a peak CO2 of 1,000 parts per million, but that doesn't necessarily factor in how the building is used in real life with regards to occupancy distribution, which is going to have a huge impact on that. And also, we know M&E plant and ventilation plant especially isn't necessarily routinely performance checked. So even a 10% drop in operational performance from design can tip the balance, where CO2 has gone from being very managed and staying within these safe limits to building significantly when the space is occupied for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So that's our sort of main focus in terms of the air quality conditions. But we do also track a range of other elements that do impact as well. So relative humidity, VOCs, various other metrics relating to pollutants that can be an issue again if they're excessive. Cover everything, John?
Yeah, that's fine, Tom. Thank you. Maybe we'll pass to Rudy, who'll take us through some thoughts on FM and how to deliver better value.
Yeah, thank you, John. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Good afternoon, everybody. Rudy Duplessis, I'm the Director of Operations here at LCMB, and I've been working in FM for a bit longer than I'd like to admit, but it's actually a pretty interesting time right now, because if you'd asked me what do people want from FM pre-pandemic, it would have been a whole range of answers. Everything ranging from a better office experience to better workplace well-being, through to attracting staff, impressing customers, and all of that. At the moment, however, it seems to be a very, very straightforward more for less. And John's already alluded to this. It's reflected in all parts of the economy, but it's all about sweating what you do at the moment. So I thought I'd share a few kind of hints on how to get there. The first point is, and this is the same for any service that you're going to deliver, you've got to start at the end. You've got to know where you need to get to, what you need to deliver, and have a strategy for doing that. It's the old adage, if you plan to fail, or if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That's where that comes from. So there's 3 key themes that emerge from this. The first one is understanding what you've got. The second one is to try and stick to the basics. A little bit more about that. And then lastly, measure and review. Just because it was right yesterday does not necessarily mean it's right today. And that is probably your most powerful opportunity for impacting what you do. So firstly, understanding your estate. This is really, really vital. And your customers can be anybody from an external body coming in. It could be the visitor coming in to see your reception. It could be the person sat on a desk 3 desks away from you. But it's understanding what they need. And that's a really good opportunity to question, and Tom's hinted on this. Ask things around, is it too noisy? Is it too loud? Is it too stuffy? Is it well ventilated enough? And keep asking. Just because you get one answer, just keep asking, and that insight is invaluable. And once you understand it, you can map your resources to it. Question everything, as I said. It's why is a very powerful question. And if you ask why 5 or 6 times to the same question, you'll generally get to the bottom of what it really means. Why are you doing this? Because somebody told me to. But why did they tell you to? Etc. etc. And you get to a point where the real reason for things either becomes clear, or it becomes clear that what you're doing isn't really necessary. And then, in terms of getting back to the basics, I've got this quote here from William Morris, who was an artist, a designer. Have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be beautiful or believe to be useful, which I think is very powerful. And we've adapted this for what we're talking about today. Have nothing in your business that you do not know to be contributing to the bottom line or serving your customers. And again, this comes back to questioning everything. Make sure that what you're doing and delivering is actually helping what you're trying to achieve. And last, and this is about the review piece, you have to accept this now. I wish I could tell you do this once, but this is not a process that will ever stop. It will keep going and going and going. And then once you think you've solved it, the economy might change. And that question that people are asking everybody in FM might change again, and you have to revisit. So you have to be flexible, you have to keep looking at it, and you have to review and review and review and review. And that's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Rudy. Hopefully you can see and hear me now. So you might want to drop out, Rudy, and just switch your camera and mic off. Thank you very much. So if you've got any questions as we go, do please feel free to drop them into the chat, and we'll pick them up as we go along. And there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers after I present. So this, I'm just going to quickly run through some tips that we've put together, which is downloadable from the website through the links I shared at the beginning. I'll share those at the end again. Just some thoughts from working with the sort of cross section of customers that we work with. So as an organization, we typically work with clients who've got large, complex workplaces, buildings and estates, and they include higher education organizations, NHS organizations, and private sector clients, similar to the organizations that Tom referenced, Havas and Wedlake Bell, who are using modern workplaces. So I'm just going to quickly run through a couple of thoughts in terms of where to start with reducing your real estate costs and thinking a little bit about value as you move into 2023. And again, building on perhaps some of the points that Rudy made in the last presentation. So as Rudy alluded to, start by understanding where you're at and where you're trying to get to, and understanding how much your real estate is costing you to think about helping your actions. So how much your real estate is costing you from a direct point of view in terms of the direct costs. So that will be obviously the management, the staff, the energy, the consumables, the third party contractors and so on. But perhaps the sort of opportunity cost as well. As Tom alluded to, if your work places are running with excessive CO2 or non-optimum relative humidity or temperature, you'll see a reduction in the performance and productivity of your staff. You'll see a reduction and a reduction in your student experience and cognitive capability. You'll see a reduction in the performance, post-operative performance and patient experience within a healing environment. So you need to think about both what things are costing you and how you could configure the existing estate and budgets to deliver a little bit more value. So some ideas in this space are to benchmark your costs against other organizations based on key metrics suitable for your sector. So it may be cost per student, cost per patient, cost per giver, cost per unit sold, and think about where the largest potential is for achieving your savings. And also thinking about perhaps where there's an opportunity for reducing those losses, such as lost productivity. And the next issue, which has become even more relevant in the post-COVID world, is reviewing space efficiency and thinking about how you operate an agile model that works with your post-COVID strategy in terms of working from home, working from the office, blending that so that you've actually got an office which is fully utilized, ideally over the course of a week, rather than partially utilized between a Tuesday and a Thursday, which we're seeing a lot of space at the moment. So there may be opportunity when you review your space utilization in the current post-COVID agile world for either reconfiguring space to repurpose it for something else that delivers value for the organization, or divesting some of your existing buildings and assets. The other thing to think about is re-examining the structure of your real estate teams, something that does tend to get overlooked. Most organizations leave their structures in for long periods of time and don't think about how they can align the value from your FM team or your project management team or your energy team to be more responsive to the organizational strategy and what the organization's there to do. Clearly reviewing on a regular basis bought-in third-party services and thinking about what they're costing you, and equally importantly, what innovation and continuous improvement your partners are able to deliver. Again, benchmarking your third-party bought-in costs against other similar organizations or metrics for the sector or for the segments that you're working within. And again, what's become really relevant over the recent period is examining your energy use and less so costs, because I think in terms of getting competitive costs per kilowatt hour of gas or electricity, that period of that phase is probably behind us. What we need to do now is look at the invest to save cases around energy. Most organizations before government intervention are seeing their energy costs increase by a factor of 3, a factor of 4, or a factor of 5. And this significantly enhances the invest to save opportunity against standard interventions such as LED replacement of existing lights, control on lighting, BMS optimization and control, replacement of fans and motors with more modern technology, even interventions with fabrics such as facades, windows, entrances, roofs and floors are getting to a point where the paybacks are significantly better. So typically we're seeing invest to save projects delivering in 3 years or less in the current environment, whereas previously it was perhaps 5 and less. So it's a good time to look at energy use and to align that with I guess your sustainability direction. Cost and sustainability are definitely moving in the same direction in the current energy market because of the high cost of gas and electricity. The other thing to think about is reviewing your maintenance program. Most organizations default to a SFG 1020, which is a standard time-based maintenance regime where things are done on a frequency basis, not necessarily on a condition basis. So it may be possible to look at increasing the frequency of activity, or perhaps thinking about condition-based activity or predictive-based activity, where you're thinking more analytically about the performance of your assets and tracking vibration, temperature, energy use, and starting to think about how you can use your maintenance program spend more effectively. The other area to think about is engaging and getting feedback from your staff and end users, because the staff who are on the shop floor invariably have the best ideas about what's working well, not working well, where there's waste in the organization, where there's the opportunity to innovate and deliver more value for money. We work with a lot of clients, and invariably some of the best ideas come from deep within the organization, where those individuals are on the, as I said, shop floor, having to deliver day in, day out. Again, end users will give you some insight into where you can deliver more value for money. So it's important to do regular qualitative feedback from the end users who you're delivering your real estate services to understand how you can actually deliver more value, and perhaps the areas where you can remove either services or excess cost that's not actually delivering value from the end user's perspective. The other thing to do, in addition to setting quantitative targets, is setting qualitative targets, so that you can think about the value that you're delivering in addition to the economic value that's being delivered. As Rudy said, one of the things that you need to do is think about challenging everything and staying flexible. So on an annual basis, we would recommend doing a sort of deep dive, looking at the budget and looking from the end user or organizational or customer perspective as to the value that's been delivered, and thinking about whether that's something you want to continue with, something whether you want to realign or spend that money elsewhere, and get into a regular plan, do, and review cycle that takes your budgets and thinks about what value it's delivering and how you align that to best effect. As I said, this document plus a range of guides giving insight into how to optimize your workplace, how to optimize the estate, how to optimize your energy spend, are all available on our website to download for free. So I'm going to pause there and open to questions from the floor. But before I do that, I've got a couple of questions which came in earlier for Tom and Rudy. So just to start with you, Rudy, what do you think the future of FM looks like in a post-pandemic world? So how do you think FM can deliver more value in an agile and post-pandemic world?
Hi, John, thanks. So the answer for me is almost intertwined within the question. It's about the agility. It's about the ability to respond to the request for change, often at very short notice, and to work flexibly within that. So one of the biggest strengths of FM is that it is essentially a logistics discipline that deals with flexible change at all moments. So in a post-pandemic world where office footprints are shrinking, I think that's accepted. But at the same time, the spaces are required to work harder. So the kind of cool slides in Google from a few years ago, that approach seems to have gone. But it's more about making sure that when people go into the workplace, what they can get there is at least as good as, if probably not better than, what they can get from working anywhere else. And that's where an FM with a finger on the pulse can really make a difference.
Okay, thank you, really. And Tom, from your perspective, where would you suggest that people should start, optimizing the performance of their workplaces or understanding how it's performing? So if somebody's got an existing workplace, where would they start in terms of thinking about how they squeeze more value out of that workplace?
Yeah, the starting point really needs to be an evaluation of where you are at baseline. We do see instances where people have, as I said earlier, coming at this from a sort of problem-solving exercise, and they've got a particular element that they kind of want to start looking at. But it's always best if you can take a step back and actually look at the bigger picture. So if you took air quality for an example, during COVID, people were getting obviously rightly concerned about ventilation and a lot of focus on ventilation. But there's lots of reasons why ventilation might not be optimized. Is it the way the FM teams are conducting their maintenance? Is it investment in assets? Is it simply not having the right data or the right controls? There's all sorts of background elements that could be feeding that. So what we try and do, I think, is approach it in terms of, let's have a look at the whole performance of that building. Let's have a look at how the people feel. Let's go and survey the plant. Let's talk to people who are operating the building, and then use that information really to say, okay, you think that's your problem? Yes, these things are probably not helping that, but actually at the moment this is probably the priority or the thing that's going to make the biggest difference in terms of the intervention you've got versus the benefit you get out. You see what I mean? It's that taking a step back, actually doing this sort of baseline performance evaluation, if you like, and then prioritizing based on your findings.
And just building on that, Tom, in your experience, when you do this sort of evaluation and you look at a more granular level at a workplace or a building, what sort of problems do you normally see come to the surface?
Quite often they can be operational in nature, and again, often coming from a sort of a lack of understanding of the building, what the building's doing at the moment, sort of taking things for granted, really. So, again, if you were looking at ventilation plant, for example, if maintenance isn't up to scratch, you see, often plant not running, but people not aware of this. The data from the sensors informs you that there's an issue. It's actually in reality often a very sort of quick fix or something quite simple that can have a massive impact on on the end result. So that's that's the kind of approach, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Rudy, based on your sort of recent experience of, re-procurement or procurement of FM services or reconfiguration of FM services, what sort of areas have you seen adding value or helping cost reduction or adding innovation to existing sort of approaches and contracts?
Okay, yeah, thanks. It sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but it's the data piece. It's the more you know, the easier it is to get the best value out of it. And the same applies for when you're re-procuring contracts, etc. So the more accurate your data is, the more certainty you can get, and also the less risk the market is having to take. So things like asset lists and cleaning schedules and security schedules that are accurate and open and can be relied on gives the bidding marketplace the confidence that they can go in without going over the top. So that helps a lot.
And we've read a lot really about organizations having more space than perhaps they need in the post sort of COVID world. Are you seeing much sort of reconfiguration of space with clients, or divestment of space, or how do you think, or how have you seen people sort of respond to that challenge?
There's a very mixed response to that. So there is unfortunately a large chunk of UK business that seems to be burying their head in the sand and just hoping it will go away. which I think is optimistic at best. But there's also everything from hybrid working and actually closing offices for part of the week to combining offices and subletting space. So you might have had a department on, say, for example, the third floor and another department on the first floor. And now one of those floors are let out to another organization. And the two departments share the space with people working from home and elsewhere on parts of the week.
Okay. So, unless there's any further questions from the floor, I'm going to finish with two questions from me, guys, to each of you. I'm going to ask you to give me 3 predictions for 2023 in our space, what you think people are going to see, and then I'm going to ask you for your one bit of advice to our attendees today in terms of how to, I guess, succeed in 2023. So who would like to go first with their 3 predictions?
Rudy would definitely like to go first.
Go on, Rudy.
I'll go first, because otherwise Tom will just steal my ideas and I can't say them out loud. So that's so first, in terms of the 3 things that I'm expecting to see, I think unfortunately at the start the economic outlook is looking pretty tough, and I think the business marketplace is going to be pretty rocky for a while. I mean, that's also illustrated by the long list of strike action that's upcoming. So unfortunately, I see some tough times ahead. I see the opportunity for innovation, things like using artificial intelligence, things like using data more effectively and better. I think that will come to the fore, not just in FM, but probably across the board. But then I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. I can see that I expect things to rebound, and maybe not next year, but the year after. I think the road will clear up, and things will get better.
Okay, so I'm going to move to Tom, and then I'll come back to you, Rudy, for your one bit of advice for succeeding in 23. So, Tom, your sort of 3 predictions for 2023.
My predictions, yeah. So I think there'll continue to be an increase or a focus on the energy side of things and how we can optimize the buildings, which kind of links in with the second point, which is that space optimization that Rudy was talking about. There's got to be more focus on using space effectively. If you look at energy, for example, rather than per square meter of your building, but actually against number of occupants, like you alluded to earlier, John, that profile is actually quite scary when you look at it over the course of a 7-day week and even a 5-day week now, which in many cases is actually more like a 3-day week. So that cost per person has gone up significantly, and certainly people need to be thinking about that. And I think there will continue to be also more interest in the user experience, and that's something we are seeing already, because people have been a little bit empowered by what's happened with COVID. Organizations are obviously taking different approaches to getting people back to the office. Some are pushing harder than others. But staff are now got a little bit of a different attitude in that they're prepared to almost push back a little bit against it, because they're confident to say, well, I've shown I can work productively from home. So understanding what the user wants and adapting our buildings to those demands again is going to be something that we see more and more of.
Okay, and Tom, just to give you the advantage over Rudy in closing, do you want to give us your tip for succeeding in 23 first, and then I'll move to Rudy?
Yeah, my tip would be invest some money in understanding that utilization, energy, indoor environmental quality mix, because then you can make some smart decisions on where to focus your improvements. Okay,
thank you. And Rudy?
Broadly similar, actually. I think don't shake your head. I think that message about understanding where you're trying to get to, and understanding how you might get there, it's worth investing the time in that, and actually do that ready, aim, fire, rather than setting off and shooting for the stars and not quite knowing what your target is.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. So let me try and summarize. I think we're expecting a bit of a tough year in 23 with a difficult economic environment, difficult inflationary figures, which are going to require all of us to get more from our budget, either in terms of cutting it or getting it to deliver more value for our sort of end users, our clients, our customers. I think we can see lots of opportunity to do that in the way that we configure workplaces, in the way that we add value to what people are doing in our buildings, what our customers are doing in our buildings, and thinking about the creative application of the money that we're spending in the FM space and in buildings. So whilst we think there's a tough year ahead, I think we're optimistic that the clients that we work with and the buildings that they're running will continue to deliver extraordinary value for their organizations, their people, and the customers that they serve. As I said at the beginning, you can download those top 10 tips that we zipped through at the end of the webinar from our website. There's a lot more guidance documents and ultimate guides on there that hopefully will help you over the next 12 or 24 months as things get a bit more difficult. And if you'd like to reach out to us, we're always here to for an informal chat or a cup of coffee to help you solve difficult or tricky issues. So do get in contact with Tom, really myself, or any member of team. Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the attendees for today. We're going to wrap up now and I'll let you get away a little over 15 minutes early, which I think gives you 15 minutes back to prepare and plan for 2023. Good luck.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.